So tutaunganisha stima, tutaunda barabara. Serikali la vijana ya bodaboda na mama mboga. So akaka slogan ikakasha goa goa. Mr. President ni route gani unatupeleka? Kusema education ni free na vile books ni expensive, ni ku exercise our minds. Kusema education ni free na jana kuna mtu alisare shule ndio alikosa uniform, ni ku exercise our minds. So unafilaje? Unafilaje sasa zenye uwezo wako na kuongoza national anthem na tujenge taifa? Alafu Korogosho, Madhare, kwa jenga wanabomolewa. Gunshot na sauti za kinga kwa mwananchi amenyeshewa zinafanya hati zao even more weta. Alafu kuna sauti na ring kwa mind, mkinichagua hakuna kijana atapigwa risasi tena, mkinichagua hakuna mwananchi atabomolewa tena. Lakini Mkenya, soma story ya Jaramogi, utagundua Kenya bado hakuna wrong history kwa classes. Ndio maana youth legacy ya mstekasti hawajui. Kazi tu ni biko. December 12 tuna celebrate Jamhuri Day, but story ya December 12 movement nani anainarrate? Mkenya, pambana. Time ina fly na Daily Nation ni propaganda za urezo kwa flights kujaribu kuland jobs kwa youth. Nation is sick, hata doctors wako mgomo. Hakuna budget ya kulipa doctors, but kuna budget ya unconstitutional CASs hata cost. The Star News Bulletin, Mwakenya nilikech kina Karimu wanatumia kupass exams za history yenye stories za kina Karari Ndudhu zimepigwa njama na kuerest kama role ya women kwa Maumau. Zakai Maleza uende. So policies walitype alafu zikasainiwa na ball pen, na hapo ndio tulichezwa. Koti wakapiga perfume na expectaji wataheshimu court order. 21st century bado gava inatumia unga ku bribe nation ku vote. Mkulima wa kahawa na go loss after sales juu kutoa chai. So nani haoni Kenya bado hakuna. Nani hata articulate article 1 ya constitution defeat all sovereign power. The people ni set Sunday rulers of protect wealth kwao. Sunday wamekrama apostles creed, alafu Monday greed ina drive na testimonies za vile 7 days without prayer inawafanya weak. Hujasikia kiongozi wa Wanga alikuwa na bongo na bado alikuwa deceived na sweets. Mambo leo still ni ukoloni. Believe me, hata Mugabe angekuwa Kenyan hangetaka anyone amuite roba ama ni roba. So tunaishi na country where the president anapenda the youth, but most strategic jobs anapenda the old, na kwa hiyo mood still awari. Country yenye ina constitution kama ni leadership na chagua humanity kwa leader wangu. Juu kama leadership ni school degrees na certificates, basi hadi zile karatasi za Waititu zilikuwa true. Ni Fedi na Dali zimisinterpret. So pieces mobs za peace wasanii wanaandika lakini bado hawana amani. Kiongozi mwananchi alichagua already anamfichia white. Already ana stock ya ngano ya kubandika posters style ya campaign na Turkana tunakufanja. Wanjiku waenzi ya Fort kwa Rimona, mkulima wa Roskoko na majali chai analia njaa toka time ya Nyayo. Afya center ni kama base plan ya viongozi wende snacks. Docs ni less, hospitals ni less, na zenye ziko hazina madawa. Doka na complain of protective gears ndio na texture ya 4M na last time. Nurses wali strike ni jana. Si wages zinafanya mwalimu kuwa takidato. Si wages zina donatives kwa evicted Kariobangi, Mukuru na Ruai. Unanyemoke Ruai ginya haki. So equality iko happy time kuna mwenye nchikare na kona aneka ya parking na neka smoking zone na parking large kuliko chuflani iko Korogosho, Dandora na Madhare. Equality iko happy time kuna mwenye nchikare na kona aneka ya parking na neka smoking zone na parking large kuliko chuflani iko Korogosho, Madhare na Dandora. So tunataka police service ya police force. Utumishi kwa wote, si utumishi kwa kara wengine. Jukara wengine ni same na photographers kila time they've got a clear shot. Makara wengine ni kama kwa class walitoa sura viatu vile wameko sharp shooters. Tulienda recruitment za makarao alafu tukaambiwa tuko na shida ya macho. Alafu after kutembea station tukapata afande amevaa miwani. So niambieni nani alifunga mwingine macho ama tulifungwa macho juu tulikosa za macho. So naitwa cricket right. Cricket Rights, mnaweza ni follow at Cricket Rights kila platform pale YouTube, tuzidi kusababisha, si ndio? Organize. Sasa comrades relax. Hawa wasanii nataka kuleta hapa next. Nimesikia ni wasanii wa smart kukuliko baba. So relax kidogo. Nimesikia ni wasanii wanaitwa Douglas wanakuja kuwa anguka nayo. Anguka nayo.
Nimeshasikia. Aha. Nimeshasikia. Cheki. Nimeshasikia kupigia ni kubla. Nachukia mandato. Anguka nayo kabaki kwa nafasi. Anguka nayo koko singo na Douglas deja patika. Hadi late night saa sita ndo taniwai. Nikupe location na kufana na hii. Tukate kwa niko choma ya jini na juu. Hata ni kushow kwanza fomu ya gidoa. Nishashika mkoa, atone chini kwa chini, akiwa hadi na mini. Sasa unasikiza City, tuna feel free. Take a video na post pale MGC. Jina ni content, kurapsi ni talent. Anguka nayo, anguka nayo. Cheki, anguka nayo, twende down low now. Sasa tu ya 50 kono juu, alafu click. Tuliza pesa, alafu one lege, anguka nayo. One lege, anguka nayo. Anguka nayo, anguka nayo, anguka nayo kama unfili nafta, anguka nayo kama pana ni ukacha, anguka nayo kama patina mabwasha, anguka nayo, anguka nayo, anguka nayo, anguka pika mtupa weka mtupa cheza chini kikombe kama duta anguka nao jodikeli shaitika daki matizera wadaki ama daki sauti serikali juni serikali tamka asali tunajua ni nani dori za ki wepetuka hapo na uni shi kutekewa kwa deni ti anguka nayo, anguka nayo, anguka nayo, cheki, anguka nayo, anguka nayo, pulo DJ, anguka nayo, cheki, pulo tena, selector DJ, anguka nayo.
All right. Okay, all right. So let's get to our second panel. Quite some business to do. We should have DJ. So this is what we're going to do. I've been instructed. This is the instructions I've been given. When I call the panelists, wanakuja kuamka nayo. Comrades, true or true. Our first panelists for the afternoon. Busy with it. Ladies and gentlemen, Nayo. Help me welcome to the stage, Nadia Mukami. Thank you very much. Our second panelist, Kwamuka Nayo, Maria Mbeneka. Nayo. Ladies and gentlemen, Nayo, Steve Mbogwa, LSK Council member, Nayo. Ladies and gentlemen, Nayo, Boniface Mwangi. All right, and okay, so we'll get to the more panelists as we go. We have one more seat to add to the Reverend, who's going to join us in the second half. But all right, let's start the discussions. Here's what we need to do, friends. This moment has demanded something, right? It's demanded that we find a reflection and a point of view on how we understand what needs to happen next. Let me start with you, Maria Beneka, of how should we have a reflection on what should happen next? What are those actual steps? Given what you've seen, how do we move forward?
Thank you, James. So I think for us to
I don't need the electrician.
I think okay, so mnanisikia? Volume. Okay, I think that's good now. First and foremost, my knees are appreciative of Gen Z. Hiyo kazi si rahisi kuanguka nayo. And I'm just glad to be alive to witness this again. And it's reminded me of why I became a lawyer in the first place. In the 90s, when I was in high school, I got my first copy of the Constitution from Maina Kiai. And I witnessed all these people getting tear gassed, getting locked up, trying to run away from the cops, Reverend Joy getting beaten up. And I asked myself, what would prompt people to be beaten and still go back? And it's the love of this country, and the Gen Z are a very significant part of Kenya's history, because we're not just, we are rebuilding this country based on this constitution that we gave ourselves. And so it's very important for us to be vigilant going forward, because the fact of the matter is that this movement is based on the rule of law. And I've seen that from the tweets, from the protests. Everybody was careful who was involved in the Gen Z protests to abide by the rule of law. And so it follows that the next steps are also guided and informed by the rule of law. The president has sacked his his cabinet, and I'm very, very proud of that singular step of sending everybody home, especially the fact that the Minister for Interior was a lawyer and presided over the abductions, the killing, disappearance, and abuse of human rights. And he had the opportunity to actually cement Article 37 of our Constitution and abide by it, but the opportunity was lost on him. So the opportunity for you and for us all as Kenyans is to ensure that the weakest link, which has been Parliament, needs to be in check. Because remember, when the vetting of the new cabinet secretaries happens, it's going to be happening at Parliament. So who is going to sit, who is going to sift, who is going to analyze? Of course, there will be much more involvement by the citizenry, because it's obvious we've taken back our power, and people will be able to say, this is who we want. We want individuals who have been subjected to the provisions of Chapter 6 of the Constitution. That is non-negotiable. And going forward, vetting should not be just a by the way, because it's a foregone conclusion. It's just been like I'm looking for the words, but you know what I'm saying. That it's just been, we're a majority in parliament, we're going to pass these names, we're just rubber stamping, we're not looking at the qualification of these people. So that's important going forward. That's what's going to happen. Secondly, what does Kenya look like now going forward? There's a recall of MPs still on the table. I know Kabete constituency have started a process. There's nothing that's stopping the citizenry from collecting signatures even as we speak. So those are processes that should actually be going forward. And the fact that people have shown interest in the finance bill, there should be bigger interest on the appropriations bill, which is now an act. Nothing stops the PSs who are still in office, who are accounting officers, from committing the budget. Absolutely nothing. So there's still a lot to be done. Eternal vigilance is the price of democracy. We cannot get tired. I must say here that I'm very, very proud of the work that Faith Odhiambo, the Law Society of Kenya, council members are doing. And civic education is important. So beyond saying that something will be done, let's be involved in how it will be done.
Right, and that's on to move that along on the how. But Nadia, for you, what do you want to see happen?
What do I want?
What do you want to see happen next?
We've kept talking about accountable governance for a very, very, very long time. And I will use my example. When we were getting into this industry, I mean the music industry, when you have a name, you have status, you weren't able to publicly call out a vice, call out, let's say, a leader for something they haven't done. For the first time in history, you've seen artists, you've seen influencers in the front line. Because sometimes when we sign contracts, sometimes you're told you shouldn't associate yourself with anything that is happening in the country. But for the first time, even as one of the things that I base off my career, I never want to talk about politics. But for the first time, I remember, hiyo siku ya maandamano ya kwanza, nilikuwa huko, nimeangushwa, niko na hadi alama up to date. So for me, it's about accountable governance. And someone said from the X space, we need to make it so unbearable for anyone who's getting into any public office to hold the office space if you do not like accountability. So anyone that is getting into office has to be ready to be questioned, to be asked, because we are the bosses. So si eti kila siku tumekopa sijui how many billions every single day, or we are being taxed, taxes. The other day I was checking bei ya tissue paper. The last time, like, nikikuwa Mwehoko, me I'm from Mwehoko, it was 15 shillings. Sai tissue paper, hakuna tissue paper hata ya 20 shillings. The cost of living inaendelea ikipanda as a day goes by. So, kwa nini tunakuwa, like, vitu zinakuwa expensive, but the salary is the same? You understand? Like, kama wewe ulikuwa unauza, nitasema aje? Kama tuseme ulikuwa uko na biashara yako, the moment you start raising your prices because what you're purchasing with imepanda bei, like the supplier price imepanda bei. So wewe ukiongezea customers wako, inakuwa ni ngumu for them to come back. You understand? So for me, it's about accountable governance. Let us hold every single person accountable. Yes.
All right. Accountable, Steve.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Is one thing I can say, Alan. What is happening now is what our fathers began in so many years ago, and along the way they lost the momentum. And I think that is how we found ourselves, because the war to bring in a new constitution is a struggle that has been there for a long time. And the day the constitution being promulgated on 10th of August 2010, the whole Africa, the whole world praised Kenya for a very progressive constitution. Everybody knew that now Kenya is politically, economically, and socially liberated. The president of Kenya, Dr. Samuel Ruto, when he was campaigning on the mantra of socio-economic justice. Article 43 of the Constitution was his anchor. When he was speaking to the youth about job employment, when he was speaking to the Mama Mboga about improving their livelihood, when he was speaking to the Boda Boda rider, who is a youth, about empowerment, he was addressing Article 43. Then what have we noticed? No one is bothered about adherence to the rule of law. What they are doing is to pull things toward themselves. What do I expect to see? Scrapping off of the NGCDF. We need to do away with that unconstitutional fund, which has turned our parliamentarians to become executive puppets. Doing away with bursaries and pumping the money to the education sector. Everybody to have an equal right, because they use these goodies to buy us off, to buy our parents off. So we want to ensure that they stop assuming that we have to go and knock their doors and queue at the CDF offices, begging to get money to go to school, yet Article 43 talk about my rights to education. So these are the expectations we want to see. So as he sent away the cabinet, we want to see very serious reforms, and that's why this call for serious reform is not ending, and we're not stopping, because we are coming for the throats of these parliamentarians, metaphorically, because look at what happens at the Senate. They dropped the bill for the conflict of interest. Why? Because they want to continue tendering for the government. Some years back, nobody wanted to supply to the government because nobody used to be paid. Right now, they are running that cartel. That is what we want to stop. That is the Kenya we want, where everyone has an equal chance. Everyone, when you're arrested, you have a right to representation. Police respect the rule of law. Everybody respect the rule of law, because that is the equalizer for everyone, because the rule of law is better than the rule of man.
Thank you. Reverend, go ahead. The same question. Can you help us figure out from where you sit, what should be this actual next steps? What would you like to see? What should we all sort of collectively try to figure out and say, this is what we think should happen?
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. Sorry, I wasn't introduced. My name is Go Yodera. There are a couple of things we need to be able to recognize, James, what we're up against in this movement. One is that the president, as real colors have come out, even in his campaign, we need to recognize that a leopard does not change its spots. In the early 90s, when we were doing our clamor, we were here in Ufungamano, he wasn't here, he was part of YK2. And they were the part of our generation that were co-opted by Moi with money. When we were doing the constitution and clamor for constitution, he voted no. In fact, he said that ni kama karatasi ya kufunga nyama. So constitutionalism is not part and parcel of those who are in office. So that is what we are up against. The second thing what we're up against is a culture, all right? A culture that does not necessarily value hard work and a meritocracy in itself. So Gen Z are trying to say, we are putting in all this effort to get what we want. Now we are seeing people wakivuka line and getting there without even earning what they are. And lastly, I think the thing that we have, and the panelists have said, is accountability. And I think those are the three things we need to continue championing moving forward. What Gen Z, I'd like to be able to encourage this group of young people, this generation of young people, is recognize that this is actually a marathon. This is not a sprint. And so there are certain gains we need to make. And I think there's somewhere we need to celebrate what we have gained these past 3 weeks. And we need to celebrate that. In as much as some of our comrades have fallen, we need to celebrate this. This is a great thing, that a government can withdraw a finance bill is a big accomplishment that I'd like to celebrate what these young people have done. It is something I am proud of you. We are proud of you. And you've done something my own generation was not courageous as you to do. And you have taken this to another level.
So just to your point, as I come back to you, there's two problems here that we have to contend with. There's the question of dialogue that keeps being bandied about. I want you to speak about this question of dialogue. And then at the tail end of this process, it's a political process. So there has to be a reasoning on how the public engages politically, because those changes have to happen in a political construct where the politicians have the experience more than anyone else.
So the issue of dialogue is who is dialoguing. So the referee cannot be the player. James, the referee can't be the player. And so you don't have the credibility. Now, the institution that I'm part of, the church, has lost its credibility too. When we were supposed to be doing what we were supposed to be doing, we were sitting in State House. So we've lost the credibility too. So there needs to be another umpire, another person doing this. We can learn from others. We're not the first ones to do this. So there are other actors that can come and do it. And secondly, James, it can't be a political process alone. Yes, we understand there are political processes that have to be happened, but there's also a place where we need to talk about the economics of this dialogue. We also need to talk about, and very big is just the philosophy of how we do it. So we cannot give it to the politicians. We left the politicians to do the final putting together of our constitution. And look what they gave us. So we can't trust the politicians. We can't. And I tell you guys, don't trust the politicians. We can't leave it alone to them. In as much as they are players, it has to be a collaborative effort.
The question of how not leaving these to politicians then become an important question. There's hyper, right now, engagement. Every citizen is engaged with every document that comes from State House, that comes from, government. But that's, in all honesty, is one thing that keeps them accountable. But at some point, as they say, people be like, I have things to do, as Nadia says. I need to go sell my tomatoes. I can't be every day on a space for 8 hours, right? That is my job. So walk me through this question of what part of engagement should we be talking about and accountability, and how does that look like, so that we keep this process alive, to make sure that we all don't lose our time and also don't get fatigued with the process.
I think one thing we need to appreciate, there was Goldenberg some time back. Let me start there. A report was prepared. People had a lot of discussions. We saw a lot of parading of people, and that dwindled. We saw Anglo-Rising came. People ate public money. They could not be held accountable, and that disappeared. People like there was a long report on land justice. Nothing came out of it. The Commission on Justice and Reconciliation, there was a report about that. Nothing ever done about it. Until people are now tired. And what we are saying is, we want to see full implementation. And because we know some of these people cannot be able to do that for the obvious reasons that they don't believe in the Constitution itself, and it's very unfortunate even the church took a position of fighting the Constitution, a very dangerous route in 2010. We need to, those who cannot do the job, they step aside and they allow those who can do the job to take over and steer this country in full implementation of our Constitution. Because some of these things, they don't need to remind the president that every child needs education. When the government was being formed in 1963, there were three things: poverty, diseases, and ignorance. Our education system is still affordable, and the people are able to go to school? No. Do our hospitals still providing medicines? You find 8 counties are lacking medicine for BCG, for tuberculosis vaccination to children. we are exposing them, and someone has money where he can walk into a fundraiser and give the same money to the church. I always wonder what this project in the church that never ends, and we attend the same churches. And so you go to that issue, the issue of poverty, ignorance, and you know, I don't know. We have ignorance, we have diseases, and we have poverty. How many Kenyans are living below $1 a day income? Most Kenyans are, that's why they are online, that's why you spend on login the whole day, because what else will I be doing? Moving around myself before I got an internship as an advocate. I remember I dropped 36 CVs in the city of Nairobi, and all the advocates will tell you, we'll pick you, but we can't be able to sustain you. Advocates are struggling. Doctors, we saw them, they're struggling. Those careers that all parents wish their children to become, you can imagine they're struggling. So what happens to the other Kenyan? It shows you that we need to get serious. We have talked about progressive realization of the socio-economic rights. Have we seen the government put in place steps that are geared towards realizing this? Deliberate steps. So we don't just talk about progressive realization. Progressive realization has a cutout that, are you putting up measures? We talk about through that gender role. Up to date, they have not done anything. Justice Maraga reminded us before he left the office about that issue. No one has taken action about it. So what we need is not dialogue, it is action. I think that is what the leadership need to know, that we have talked too much. We need to see, I don't need to remind the member of parliament that I am telling you I don't want an extra tax. I want you to be accountable about that. I don't remind the member of parliament that I am paying you a salary of almost $1 million shillings, then I pay you allowance to attend your plenary. Who pays us to attend plenary? And you have a salary. Who pays you to attend a committee of the job you are employed to do by the people? What makes them so scared that once they get elected, they need 10 bodyguards? What are they doing wrong? They know it. And that's what we want them to address.
Okay. Nadia, you raised an important question the last time about the role of creative, and and we've seen what the creatives have been able to do for this movement in this time, using your own talents to push the conversation forward, musicians and the rest. But also, there was a question about the corporate world that would stop you doing these things before. There was a reason for that, because the corporate world and the government work, hand by hand. What happens when that comes back? When you're told by the person who's gives you the contract that I continue seeing you doing this Gen Z thing, I can't keep on supporting. What happens?
For me, I'd say any sane person that has seen how this revolution started. I remember the first thing was hisi time boy post. For instance, I work with Snapchat right now, and I really appreciate them because we didn't have to tell them. They saw and they're like, you guys, you can do whatever you want to do. You understand? So for me, it's about, if you're a sane person, you can see that the pressure and the force is something that you cannot run away from. It will catch up with you. So I think we've had, corporates that have been really understanding and supportive, and we haven't been blacklisted yet. We haven't been sent that you're out of work email. So they have understood. And today, I just want to talk about the power of social media as well. Huwa wanasema msanii ni kioo cha jamii. Every time. Personally, when I started doing music, I was in Maseno University, and during the holidays, we'd go to Kenya National Theatre. And we had something, if there's any creative here, they know PAL, Poetry After Lunch. And what most people don't know, I started out as a poet. And I'd go there, if I do a small, maybe small poetry, I'd have other guys just listening to them. And what these people would talk about is the social injustices. It meant that the time wasn't then. It's a process, it's a journey. We had begun that journey of going to Poetry After Lunch. You're listening to people talk their truths. Talk about mimi nimetoka Kibera, these are the problems that I have seen. But now it has come a place whereby now we can retaliate that on social media. I can tweet and say, guys, MCSK needs to be held accountable. We can say, Prisk was given the license to collect on behalf of the other CMOs. public participation. Has it happened? We are the artists. We are the ones who are paying for these people. And that is another conversation that has been held for so long, ever since artists before me found a problem there. I have found a problem there. And I am not going to leave, because at the end of the day, there's a time gonna reach, I'm not able to dance on stage as I am dancing right now. So it is, as I said before, it's accountable governance. We have to hold each and every person accountable. Kila mtu. Now, to the ladies, maybe when you are wamechaguliwa, ama they've been given a position, wasiende wakatuaibisha. We've seen the likes of Karen Nyamu, more of a socialite rather than a leader. There are so many deserving women. I am sorry to say that. It's a stray bullet, but it's the truth. There are so many deserving women who are intellectual, who are smart. We don't need to know your personal life. What have you done for the girl child? For the longest time, women have fought. You're given a position, and all we can talk about is your personal life. She really needs to check herself. Yes.
All right. Thanks. Maria, if anyone engages with politics, and we look at this in this sense, that it would be foolhardy if we're not to think that the political class is going to walk away from this and surrender and say, okay, you guys have won, fantastic, we're out. Okay? That is not going to happen. They're going to rely on what they do best, which is politics. And I suspect this is what's going to happen in the next 2-3 years. From where you sit, with all these issues that we need to solve, and there are many, right? And they're serious, parliament and constitutional, two-third gender rule not anywhere being affected. The many things on the priority of this list we just don't know and don't have. Give us some advice. How should we look at these questions that we do exercise our minds and say we should have priorities, bare minimums, and go forward? Because the political class will have that. And this is a long battle, as Reverend Goya told us.
The first thing, we need to appreciate that the country has changed. It's not business as usual. So there's been a shift in the minds of Kenyans. Whether they're saying it or not, whether they're organizing or not, it's present. And we have to seize the moment. So where do our leaders come from? They come from within us. Today we'll sit here and say, hey, James unatosha mboga. Where tutakuchagua? But what happens? What happens? What follows after? Hey, Mhesh. What do we say? Toboka. Kakitu kalanch. Mhesh. That's the problem. Our politics, our governance is transactional. And the minute I give you a 50 bob, a 100 bob, a 200 bob, I'm done with you until next time. So this shift has to be literal. Like, we can't just talk about it. We have to live it. We have to talk it. We have to walk it. The fact of the matter is, politicians are smart. Even the ones we say are uneducated are street smart. So they will just look at what is trending and jump on it. And if we've decided that going forward, we're serious about our governance, we're serious about who gets into office, how the hell does somebody get elected while they're in jail? How do you get elected after shooting somebody dead? And DCI put out a notice that they're looking for you, and you get elected. So what Nadia, what Mike Mushiri, what other artists and individuals and human rights activists have been doing needs to be amplified. Take civic education very literally, because there are people who think, there's an MP, I think he's called Kamala, in Western, he was telling his people that sasa mjue, tunamaliza maneno ya CDF, sasa msikuje kwangu kuniomba. Because that's the way things are done. You come, you ask me for 300 bob, sawa, sawa. And he'll not perform, he will not build that road. I mean, nothing will get done. So we need to amplify the voice of civic education. I think that's very important. People need to understand why electing an MCA is very important, because that's the person who's closest to you in terms of resources that have been devolved to the county. Why a political party is not more superior to an individual who's representing you at the ground. It's important for us, and I think you've debunked this, that tribalism is no longer a factor. And as long as it remains a non-factor, we are ahead. So mtu wetu, that politics is gone. So if we keep at it, and if we keep agitating for the very things that we're actually talking about, governance, accountability, transparency, right from the elective positions. And I think this is an opportunity for young people. You can get elected without being on a party. Yeah? But remember, if our institutions, and this is a very critical point for me, James, if our institutions are not safeguarded, today our institutions are failing us because they are at the mercy of the executive. Why? Because the executive pays. They're the ones who provide a budget. So everybody who's in a position of leadership, a position of governance, a position of representation is swallowed by the system. And we've talked about the system. When you get there, you're given, the first thing you're given as a chairman is an allowance, seating allowance. The next thing, mkubwa unataka gari gani? And that thing gets to your head and you forget why you got there in the first place. So let's fight for our institutions. Let's get our institutions back. Let's make sure anybody who's nominated to serve on those institutions is a credible person and they can always pass the suitability test that is Chapter 6. Remember, in Kenya, we don't have an absence of laws. Steve Wanjiru talked about the conflict of interest bill that is currently in Senate. That bill, it's not that we don't have laws that could have jailed people for conflict of interest. What we've had is deliberate missteps in the application of the law. So the unification of these laws is important. And that's why when you said that, what will we do going forward? Because people will get tired and they'll go back to doing what they need to do. Let us just hold people to account. Start by recalling. And I like that process that people are actually taking now. And let's keep whoever is in office accountable. Let's keep them on their toes. Let's get involved in the budget making process. Do we know when the cycle starts? Because it's about to start again in September.
Right.
So that eternal vigilance. It's a lot to ask for the citizenry, but I think it's a price we are ready to pay, and it's been obvious from the reasons.
I want to get one comment from Sylvia, who's been waiting for like an hour. Sylvia, if you can have your minutes now, what is the thing that you want us to do next? Do you have Sylvia?
Yes, good afternoon.
Go ahead.
I'm speaking as a lay person that according to how things are right now, we understand that a government is formed by 3 arms. I think we have 3 arms of the government. But as things are now, it's like the parliament and the executive have merged. So we do not have oversight. The legislature, people like the MPs are supposed to represent the people who voted them to go there and do the legislation. But even if they do the legislation, is it favoring a common citizen? Everything they are doing is about them. So I was asking, and I'm speaking as a lay person, so just pardon me, and if at all I'm wrong, just try to enlighten me more. As a lay person, under Article 1 of the Constitution, can I say clause number 2, which says that people can exercise their right, is it their right, directly, or can I say the leadership or something? Like we can exercise our power directly. Now, how do we do it legally? Because right now, the parliament is there, but it's like we are the ones who are doing the job. We are here on the streets. We are the ones providing oversight. We are the ones pushing for better legislation. So how do we go about it? Because all this mess is because whoever we put in power messed us up. This also has come about because of the micromanaging, the executive micromanaging the other two, trying to micromanage the other two arms of the government. How do we get ourselves into this?
All right, thank you. I think that's an important question, and we will start with the Mary, then we'll go to Gary. This idea that you elect people to get to office and they decide that we know best, all right? In fact, you become very clever all of a sudden, and I know what you want. And I think we saw that on this finance bill, that MPs literally told everyone that you guys have no point whatsoever. We know best and we'll do what we want. How do we stop that from ever happening again? That a person who gets elected becomes truly a servant, not our lords?
I think it just goes back to the same thing of public participation, because what happens is that we have to accept that once we elect a leader, we are expecting that they will go and deliver on the mandate. So the issue of, did we elect a party or an individual? Because usually the wave, you're told, this one got in because sababu ya wave. And the people were with the wave. So that's why the MPs, some of it's not you, it's the party. It's not your, it's the party. So the first thing is, because you cannot recall until they've been in office for 2 years, is just to keep a record of it, I guess. Because now, the constitutionally, you cannot recall before a certain period. But the fact of the matter is, the way we have seen participation being creation of ChatGPT, breaking down the information. That's the first thing. Breaking down the information, ensuring it reaches people. Petitions are online. It's easier now to find people, to bring people together. Before you had to be, moneyed to do these things. So it's.
How do we make our politicians actually work for us? How do we stop the arrogance, the kiburi that they have, that because I'm in office now, I do whatever I want?
The message has already been sent. The message has already been sent. And what I'm very happy to see is now legislators now being very penitent about what they're doing. That's one. But then the second one is just adding what she has just said in itself. There are ways we can just keep our legislators accountable. One is just, there's a roll call in parliament. So when you go in parliament, you have to, sign in. And so we need to be able to see, just the way when we were in school, you sign a roll in itself. Were you present? And that information is available to any person in the public. We know one legislator now who has barely been in parliament for 1.5 years or so, that it's now out in the public space. And then thirdly, it's being able to get access to your member of parliament and demanding access to your member of parliament as often as you can. Like you have a constituency office. How often is this member of parliament in their office? And so that is another place where you can go and demand to be able to see them. What are your office hours at the constituency office? That is where you can meet them at their local office. And if you are a big office, the government has given this MP or legislator the resources to cover the entire, like North Hall. That's a huge constituency. But there are different constituency sections where you can meet your legislator. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Steve.
Yes, I think, sorry. I was thinking, as I was talking, I was thinking about how we gauge our MP's performances. And we diverted to the duties and the responsibilities that are with the ministers, cabinet. Those are the parameters. Most of the time we gauge when we are voting for a member of parliament. Amejenga barabara ngapi? Ameweka mashule ngapi? Is that the job of a legislator? Because that has been the parameter for voting. So I think even as we move forward in this conversation, and as a your concern, we need to do an inward reflection as a people and ask ourselves, are we expecting the wrong thing from the right people? Are we putting you as a member of parliament, then we expect you to build roads for us, then we have a cabinet which has a ministry of road and a budget to do roads. So that is where we spend our money, wastage, and it becomes a point of a lot of wastages and privileges. And I think my feeling and my contribution to this conversation of the young people, and I want the whole Kenyans to embrace this, not as a Gen Z affair, but the spirit of the youth. Why the spirit of the youth? I want to say this quoting Henry Ford. There's something he said that the greatest thing you can do to yourself is to keep your mind young. Why do you need to keep your mind young? Because at your formative age is when you have a vision, is when you have ambitions. So once you become old and you allow the aged you to be complacent, you lose the vision. We got a constitution in 2010 with a lot of ambition. That was our youth at that time. We got our independence with a lot of ambition. We became complacent. That's where these guys, when you visit them, they give you a handout. Before you even negotiate, you live with a bahasha. You see a priest has gone to State House, they're living with a brown bahasha. And you saw them walking in, they didn't have one. So I don't know, there's a Bible inside there. You create an office of intercessors. And like, you prayer requests. These are crazy things that we have been witnessing as a country. And it's high time we start holding our leaders accountable. Even the judiciary itself. The last time there was with all due respect to the courts, we filed a petition challenging the deployment of the. And I don't need to go to the details, but we all saw the live stream of that particular ruling. We all read the Constitution. I don't need to remind anyone the clause in the Constitution. And we can question the integrity of such a person when they're holding a public office. So we need to hold these people accountable. We need to have the right people doing the right job and not putting the wrong people. That's why I keep on saying, until and unless we push for the removal of CDF from the hands of parliamentarians, we are going to continue electing people because they are giving us money. That's why they buy the ticket, because they buy it. I have friends who contribute, give me campaign money. Why is it costing almost 50 million to join parliament? If I save the whole salary for parliament from day one to the last day, I can't raise 50 million. Even if you work with simple mathematics, because they have a lifestyle to maintain. So there's a lot of inward reflection that is needed, both to the people, to the president, to the leadership at all levels and at all arms, and we need to hold them serious accountable.
All right, thank you very much, Reverend Goi Odara, nashukuru sana, Steve Bugwa, and Mariam Mineka. Well done, very well, thank you for the panel. I leave Nadia to perform as we exit the stage. Thank you very much. You've all been very nice and very kind.
Thank you very much.
Ningewaomba tusimame. Let us stand up, please. You know, when I came here, I didn't come today to perform, by the way. I didn't come as a Kenyan artist, a celebrity. I came here as a concerned Kenyan. And first off, I want to send my condolences to the families of the bereaved soldiers who we were together kwa barabara, kwa streets as we were fighting. So my biggest condolences to the family and to anyone here who's been affected by this time. As Boniface has said, yeah, they've partnered with Kenya councillors. What is it called again? I think I've forgotten the name. So you can see them after this. And for me, it's also to say, we've had a win, yes. We've had some wins, but at the same time, we need justice for the people, to the families zenye wameachwa na wapendwa wao. They need closure. Ama namna gani? Tuweke ngome weka maombi. Kazi ya Mungu haina makosa. Ingekuwa binadamu anatoa ningekosa. sio jujuni, si keleleni. Turudie tena. Kazi ya Mungu haina makosa. Ingekuwa binadamu wanataa ningekosa. Sio jujuni, si keleleni. Sio kazi. Hoya hoya hoya. Hoya hoya hoya. Nilichopata nikiomba walisema kitakwisha. Nikitoa shukrani hadharani wakasema najamba. Hao binadamu walilipa wiki. Sasa imepita miaka bado wanasubiri. Kazi ya Mungu haina makosa. Tuone wote. Ingekuwa binadamu wanatoa ningekosa. Sio juju ni maombi. Ni maombi. Si kelele ni maombi. Ni maombi. Sio juju ni maombi. Ni maombi. Si kelele ni maombi. Ni maombi. Hoya hoya hoya. Hoya hoya hoya. Hoya hoya hoya. Na mikono nitainua, magoti nipige. Nimweleze jinsi alivyotenda katika maisha yangu. Kazi ya Mungu haina makosa. Ingekuwa binadamu wanatoa ningekosa. Kazi ya Mungu kweli haina makosa. Ingekuwa binadamu wanatoa ningekosa. Sio juju ni maombi. Asanteni sana. Ni maombi. Si kelele ni maombi. Ni maombi. Sio juju ni maombi. Ni maombi. Si kelele ni maombi. Ni maombi. Asante sana, asante, asante, asante. Ila Mungu hawezi kubali uanguke. Alichoanzisha leo lazima atakamilisha. Kazi ya Mungu haina makosa. Ingekuwa binadamu wanatoa ningekosa. Kazi ya Mungu.
Najushasikia wadadis. Aha, najushasikia. Najushasikia tukiingia ni kublast. Uko kabado nachukuliwa madamso. Anguka nayo tabaki mfano na vibe. Anguka nao koko single for now. Dragi stage patika. Hadi late night saa sita ndo tani wai. Nikupe location na kufana na hii. Suka teleka video na goal pale NGC. Jina ni Kandel Kurap City Talent. Anguka nayo. Anguka nayo. Anguka nayo twende down low now. Sasa jia sisi kono juu alafu click. Tuliza pesa alafu one leg. Anguka nayo. One leg. Anguka nayo. Anguka nayo. Anguka nayo. Anguka nayo. Anguka nayo kama uko na mikasa. Anguka nayo kama mikasa. Anguka nayo kama patina mabwa. Anguka nayo kama mtuko wa mtuko. Anguka patikani. Kadile mecha sita ndo tani wai. Anguka nayo. ati anguka nayo na katika msupa weka juka cheza chini vikolezo matuta anguka nayo teteteteteteteteteteta anguka ndani na tisho za wadani beba ama dani sabu serikali serikali tamka asali tunazani nani flow sati ndanduka hapo na udichi aha mana zi mana zoko anguka nayo 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 kama kuna bilasta anguka nayo kama patina mabwasha anguka nayo ati anguka nayo nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo, anguka nayo, anguka nayo. Kama uko na nyukasa, anguka nayo kona patina magwasi, anguka nayo mtukwa iswa, anguka nayo, anguka nayo, anguka nayo, anguka nayo, anguka nayo, anguka nayo, take it, DJ. Hey,
a round of applause. A round of applause for the guys Anguka Nayo. Thank you so much for your patience. We get into another session, a round of discussions as well. I'd like you to help me welcome my set of panelists on stage. The first person that we have is Otsiemo Nyamoya from the Human Rights Watch. Please, a round of applause for him as he makes his way up. Thank you so much. You can have a seat. And then we have Dr. Njoki Wamae. She is an assistant professor of politics and international studies from the USIU Africa. Please, a round of applause for her. Kupiga makelele. Tumetoka. And then the next panelist is Cyprian Nyamwano. He is from the Kenya border. Thank you so much. First Mwangi, the human rights activist, we all know him. Please. I am Linus Mwashigadi. I will be facilitating this round of discussions. Please, karibu sana. So I want us to begin from where we've come from in terms of activism in Kenya and what brought us to where we are here today. So I will begin from you, Boniface Mwangi. You have been an activist. What has been the changes, the journey, and what has been the difference with this set of protests that we've had in Kenya?
The journey began in 1922 when a lady called Nyanjiro stood up on what is called known as Harituku Road, and she told the men who are there, if you're not going to challenge these police officers, give me your trousers. And from challenging that was the first recorded protest in this country. And that particular day, I think over 100 people died, but the British never recorded how many people died. And then he was killed on that particular day. And fast forward to today is that there's been a passing of the baton over the years to a level where Cyprian is organized via phones and in person, to where we are now organizing online, where people show up and say, you know what, online has become a public square, but now the public square is going offline. So you go online and say this is the issue, and you go offline. But I think the game changer is most of the young kids in this country are very angry about the state of the nation, and then they're fearless because they have nothing to lose. They are hungry, they are angry, they are unemployed. I was talking to some young people from the you can't even date. You can't even have a girlfriend. You can't even make someone, you can't even think of starting a family because how are you going to feed that mouth? So when the president decided to bring the finance bill, and it's going to even tax those who don't even have jobs, they're unemployed, with this, it's called shift, this thing that is there, the hunger just exploded. So where are we at? We are very hopeful as a country. Kenya has changed forever. Not let anyone like it hasn't changed. That's where we are at. Kenya landscape has changed, and people have reclaimed back their sovereign power. We're in charge right now, and it's like we're trying to push out a baby. It's a very critical stage because if you make a mistake, the baby might die and kill the baby, and the mother or one of them survives. So you must midwife this process very, very carefully that is not carjacked. The last few days, we've seen the old fossils, these very old politicians, trying to steal the struggle from the people. They're trying to own that space. And there's a possibility the next 2 days, Saturday is a Harambee Day and Burials Day. So tomorrow they're going to be all over with one agenda to center Raila Odinga in this conversation. And we refuse.
That's a very good point, and I would go back to it. Let's hear from Cyprian. From your own perspective, what has the journey been for you in terms of the activism we've seen in Kenya?
Well, the journey has been real. It has been tough. We've lost people. I thank God that I'm alive. When we went to committee, we saw the cells where a lot of our comrades in the 1980s died in prisons, including Naivasha, Kamiti, Shimo La Tewa, and all those jails and prisons. The torture chambers that used to be physical at Nyayo and the Nyati House are now happening, and our young people are being thrown into swamps. But I don't want to talk about myself today. I want to answer only one question that you've asked. What is different between the struggles that we have been in and this one? Because I think that's something that has been missed in all the conversations I've listened to. And my answer is this. This is the only generation which has refused to be used. The only generation which has refused to be used. And I want to use that to bring the struggles. The Mau Mau, Mogoni Nyangiro was the mother of the Mau Mau. If you look at it, the Mau Mau were used. They died, they were deprived of land, they were kept in cells and in jails. Then Kimati died, but they were used by the home guards, the Kenyatta, the Jomo Kenyattas and the home guards who took over power. Then the second liberation, which we died for, we went to jail for, to bring back Section 2A. We were again used. The people who took over power were not the people who were in the fight. Then comes the Kenya Constitution 2010, which the likes of Osieno and myself and all of us in Jokia invested our lives in. Who is the beneficiary of the Constitution of Kenya 2010? William Ruto. The one who said no is the one who is the president. Uhuru Kenyatta, who was against the Constitution, and Rigathi Gachagua are the people who are the beneficiaries of the Constitution. Again, we were used. This is the only generation since Kenya was established as a colony. Kenya became independent. We only have one generation which has refused to say, which has said, you are not going to use us. Raila every time uses dead young people in the streets to negotiate handshakes. 2007, the numbers who died 1,000, by the way, the number was more than 7,600, but we used the number that the government gave us. Then we went into handshake. Comes 2017, hundreds are killed. Power is shared. Then we come to 2022. Last year you saw 75 died. They were used to form NADCO. The young people are saying there is not going to be another dialogue where you are going to use our deaths to gain power. So I have to give Gen Zs, I have to give it to them that they have stopped something tragic, treacherous that has been going on about Kenya. And this generation has said, no more using our blood, our sweat, and our tears to negotiate power.
Thank you so much, Cyprian. Dr. Njoki, rallying on the conversation here, the journey. What is your perspective?
Just something, and thank you. I'm glad we are talking about the journey, because the last 3 weeks, if you even try and get into any of these spaces, it's impossible. You don't have 100,000 followers to speak. So I'm happy we are here acknowledging also the journey. So, and we can look at it in 3 phases. Of course, before independence, Mau Mau and all the rest, like Mudhoni Nyanjiro from 1922. Mau Mau is our DNA. Resistance is our DNA, right? Don't ever forget that. For us Kenyans, only 2 countries resisted the British or the French violently before 1970. Later we had the Portuguese resisting. But before 1970, there were only 2 countries, and one was Kenya, and the other one is which one? You know, I'm a teacher. Yes. Algeria. Yes. The liberation front in Nigeria. In Africa is only those 2 countries. So, and it's because of the Mau Mau, and you know the guerrilla warfare that they fought. So resistance is our DNA. And with that, of course, even post-independence, people resisted the fascist state that Kenyatta, because many times we are just looking at this Ruto. We are forgetting the mistake started from Jomo Kenyatta, because he instituted a very fascist state. You know the many deaths that are still unresolved. And this politics of let's forget and move on is what got us where we are. A country where impunity is our DNA now, right? And so we need to look at that past from Kenyatta, the mistakes he made, and especially in setting up the structures of Kenya. Look at Tanzania with all its problems. Tanzania is doing much, much better in terms of politics. Kenya, we keep bragging about our economy. So what? The economy, if you don't have your rights, those chapter 4, the Bill of Rights, not just the what do you call it, social and political rights, but also the economic rights. But the social and political rights are the foundation that offer you the space to demand for the others. And the social and political rights, which are enshrined in chapter 4, they should be protected. We already have them. And that's why we are saying, for me, I'm saying, let's not get excited with his changing ministers, because they'll still come back. We should be looking at chapter 4 and chapter 6. Chapter 4, our rights. Our people have been killed. Young people have been killed. These universities where I also teach, they're quiet. You know, so till we have justice, till we have the killer cops arrested, till Koome is gone, you know, and those are some of the things we are saying must change. Then we can deal with, as we deal with the rest of everything. But having said that, it's a good moment. I think Gen Z is probably now what we can call the third liberation. This is I think we've now entered the third liberation. And the second liberation, and I'm glad we are here in this hall. Those of us who don't know, this hall is a very important hall, Ufungamano. And Cyprian is here. I've seen many other comrades who are there those days during the IPPG reforms and NCC especially, and the National Convention on
National Convention Assembly, exactly.
Exactly. That's where the Constitution of Kenya was changed, and Section 2A was repealed, and that's where we can tell off Zakayo and anybody else about why, because we fought for that constitution. And it's really sad that we have to keep fighting. That's why we need to have the right people in power, so that we are not fighting, so that it's people who also think like us, people who know human rights is part of state making. And I'm very glad, because that second liberation, first liberation was the Mau Mau and what they did, and the people who liberated Kenya. Remember, you need to also know who liberated Kenya, because the challenge is opportunists took over the real liberators like Deda and Kimathi. Second liberation, it is those people who fought for the second liberation of this country and the return of and who helped us get the constitution. And some of them are here. Please wave, because we need to acknowledge you. Please wave. I've seen some people, second liberation, Kegoro there, Unanyamaza too. You know, thank you, comrade. Because we have to, many of us, especially the new Gen Z activists, we are forgetting the journey. When you get that space, remember this is a marathon. People have died, people have been there. Social, what do we call them? The social justice centers have been killed on the streets, have been walking in the streets. Kina Mama Rahma, please, let's wave also. Let's acknowledge these people, you know, and all the social justice activists, Olal, Viva comrades. These are the people who have brought us. Let's not look at it as it's 3 weeks old. Now, we must always carry that journey. And when you're given to that opportunity, remember those people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's tweak the conversation a little bit, and let's talk about the journey when we look at police accountability and brutality. Of course, police have been there throughout the journey in terms of the first liberation, as Dr. talked about. But with the new Constitution 2010, there was different expectation in terms of how they would engage the protesters. So Otsieno, take us through how the journey has been and how do we make police accountable?
Thank you. My name, I'm called Otsieno Namwaya. I work with Human Rights Watch, but I will also speak more broadly because I've been an activist since the 90s. First of all, I think last week or early this week, I had somebody say in Parliament, I think it was Danson Mugatana, that this is the third liberation. The second liberation, there was in the 90s, and then there was the independence struggle. And I think it is broadly true, but I have a different thinking, because the second liberation in reality aborted. Picking up from what Dr. has said here, it aborted because if you look at some of the discussions we are having here, they were the same discussions, partly the same discussions we were having in the 90s. The issue of the portrait of William Ruto. I remember sometime, I think 1997, we were the Gen Zs then, we were called Generation X. We had in this same spot, simply and correct me, but we were wondering, why do we have Moi's portrait everywhere? And that we need to stop that. That's part of imperialism. So having said that, that struggle, second liberation struggle picked up from independence struggle, which a lot of people believe that the independence struggle aborted and died with the death of Dedan Kimathi in 1957. If you look at movements such as FERA, which is February 18th Revolutionary Army, or stock movement, which was with people like Akina, Brigadier Odongo, Raphael Wangondo, and the rest. The reasoning even for naming it FERA was that we aborted the struggle in 1957. We need to pick it from where we aborted it. That was 1957. That's why it's called February 18th Revolutionary Army. Dedan Kimathi was killed on February 18th, 1957. So it's part of the long struggle. So picking it up from there, I was supposed to talk about police accountability. I don't want to go into details of repeating some of the things that some of the speakers who are here in the morning had already spoken about. I want to basically flesh out some of the worrying trends that we have noticed for the last maybe 7 years that we need to be really worrying about and calling out the authorities for what is happening. Let me talk about IPOA a bit. IPOA was basically created by the Constitution of Kenya 2010 and then operationalized by the 2011 law, IPOA Act of 2011. But it came effectively into operation in 2012 when they were constituted, and then they started setting up in 2013. By 2013, we had a lot of hopes. They had just 6 investigators. But they could try to reach everywhere. They would be in Kisumu, they would be in Nairobi, they would be where? There were just 6. Right now, IPOA has approximately 100 investigators. But what do? If you look at their case success rate from 2013 to now, how many cases have they successfully prosecuted? How many? I think about 12. if I'm not wrong, I think about 12 or 13 cases. How many cases have been filed with them? At some point, IPOA used to post these details on their website. They no longer do that. Why? Because if you look at the cases that have been filed with IPOA, by around 2018, 2019, there were around 7,000 cases of police brutality and police misuse of power and all that. How many could they investigate? There are about 100, maybe 1,000, up to 2022. How many have they successfully prosecuted? About 22. However, the details, those details don't tell you the problem with IPOA right now. IPOA was initially in the thinking of the 2010 Constitution and the second liberation, the issues we had, especially after the 2007 elections and the killings by police, was that we need a civilian institution where people can walk in and report police abuses, so that people don't have to go to a police station to report cases to be investigated by the same police officers who have committed the offenses. So it was created as a civilian institution. It was supposed to be friendly, welcoming, understanding, transparent. But what has happened today, if you look at IPOA, it has transformed itself. It has become more like a police institution. So it's no longer transparent. Those cases they used to post on their website showing how many have come and which ones are killings, which ones are torture, they no longer post that. Then the other is that they are no longer acting like they're civilian. They are more interested in parleying with the police and being called to State House than actually opening their doors for the civilians to report cases. And then the issue of their performance, I know people will celebrate. We have IPOA because 12 police officers have been prosecuted, they've been sent to jail. But there's nothing to celebrate. If you look at the number of killings we have had since IPOA came into place in 2013, they cherry pick cases. So if there's a police officer who has killed somebody in Kangware and there's pressure, the government is also worried or embarrassed, they go and investigate and prosecute that one. But killings such as what is going on today during protests, we have never had IPOA prosecute officers for killings during protests because those are state-sanctioned killings. So in 2017, there were over 100 cases we documented. I think there were more, but we documented 104. IPOA has focused on two, Baby Pendo and Stephanie Mora, cherry picking what they can prosecute because these are low-hanging fruits, but they don't go to the bottom, the root cause or the root cause of the problem. So out of 100 plus, they picked two and they never even successfully prosecuted. People are having to go and prosecute them on their own. Between 2014 and 2015, there were over 100 people who had disappeared in Nairobi, Northeastern, Coast region. We presented these cases for IPOA. To this day, they have never prosecuted any. In 2020, during Corona, there were over 20 cases. I don't know how many have been prosecuted. Last year, there were over 70. They promised to take people to court. I think by October, they were saying they're going to court. Nobody has been prosecuted. This one is going to go the same way. So even if IPOA, in fact, their behavior this time has been more strange because before then, we used to communicate with them, we used to know what they're doing. Right now, they've shut their doors. They don't want to say what they're doing. We need to start calling out IPOA. That's one. The second one, I'd ask for what I don't mind.
If you could hold on, we could come back in terms of now what needs to be done to ensure the accountability.
I'm trying to flesh out. So what needs to be done in the terms of IPOA is to begin to call for more accountability, more transparency for IPOA. If you allow me to go through the points.
Okay.
So the other worrying trend is when it comes to accountability, especially where there are killings, like what we have now, police are refusing to do their bit. So the National Police Service Act of 2011 says that police, as 2012 I think, police are supposed to, once there's a killing, police are supposed to do preliminary investigations. The commander is supposed to share details of that investigation with the IPOA, with the Inspector General, Then IPOA picks up from there to start investigation. That preliminary investigation never happens. So IPOA has to start struggling to understand which police officer shot, what happened, what were the circumstances of the shooting. That should have been in the preliminary report. And then the second thing is that when killings happen in a setting like what we have today, the demonstrations and the protests, what is supposed to guide IPOA in investigating those cases is what is called the operational order, which is basically says which police were deployed where and which orders were they given. And then the second one is what is called the Register of Movement of Arms and Ammunition, which basically narrows down when somebody is killed to understand who had which ammunition, who had which gun, and who was where. So when the investigations come, like in Kisumu, a lot of the killings that happened in 2017, police refused to hand over the Register of Movement of Arms and Ammunition. Police refused to hand over the operational order. So it became impossible to understand who shot where, but they're covering themselves. Up. But they only do that because of lack of political will. What they're doing is political. It's a political order to kill. So what's the problem there? It is lack of police independence. And it takes us back to the struggle of the second struggle, which was to ensure we have an independent police authority. And then the other is the issue of the new trend that we have seen from 2017 is the role of the hospitals and mortuaries. So in the past, you go to a hospital and a mortuary and quickly you get the register and get to know who has been brought in, who was shot, who was killed. And then you get to know their names and you get to know their injuries. Today, what they are doing is that they have created 2 registers. And that's why I was cautioning our colleagues in Githurai, don't say you have only 2 or 3 killings, because you don't know the killings. Or we went to Kenyatta Hospital and we found 3 bodies. You need to do more to understand how many people have been killed. Right now I'm hearing people say 50 people have been killed. It's not 50. You don't know. Because what's happening in mortuaries is that they cleared 2 registers. So the front one is the normal one, where they put like 3 or 4 cases. So when you go to look for people who have been killed, they show you that one. But there's another police register, where they have all the other bodies. So after 25th, the invasion of Parliament, at City Mortuary they had 6 bodies. And we're wondering, but how can there be 6? When even at Parliament alone, we know that at least 8 were killed. And they refused, they just said 6. Later on, we came back and talked to the staff, and we realized there were other bodies being hidden elsewhere, which were not in the register. And that is happening not just there. We saw it in Kisumu in 2017. They hide those bodies, and they make sure you never get to know what exactly happened. We also know that sometimes they don't take those bodies to the mortuaries. In Kisumu, we discovered bodies, I think bodies are discovered in Lake Victoria, at around 26 bodies, 3 or 4 months later, after we had looked for bodies in JTRH, in Kisumu District Hospital, everywhere. There were no bodies, but they had been thrown elsewhere. Even this one, let us be very careful, because we don't know where those bodies are.
Thank you so much for that. Going back to Bonnie, you spoke about the opposition wanting to take this civic engagement that we've seen in Kenya for the last 4 weeks. What is your reaction? Do you feel they're bringing back the political rhetorics and reaping where not so?
It's a betrayal of the people. So one of the constant factors in the last 20 years has been Raila Odinga. If you come to the Uhuru, now he's doing that to Ruto. And every time he does that, he betrays everyone who's involved in the movement. I covered post-election violence in 2007, and the victims were never compensated. I heard Cyprian say the number was like 7,000 people died, but the government claims about 1,200 people died, but there was no compensation and there was no justice. And the difference between that time and this movement is that one of the things that people are saying in the streets is that we must have accountability, and we must have justice, and we must have reparations. So we must compensate the people who have been killed by the police, and we must get the killer cops to be to be arrested. On Tuesday, we're going back to the streets to demand Kwame to resign. But if you look at Raila Odinga, he has never demanded for those things. Every time he shakes hands and gets a deal, he doesn't talk about compensation for lives or justice for the victims. He moves on. He's a mercenary, actually. Basically, that's what Raila has become over the years. So yesterday I was in a space with his son, and I told him, go and tell your father not to betray his grandkids. Because basically the guys in the streets are actually his grandkids. I can be Raila Odinga's son because I'm the same age with Raila Jr. But the people who are protesting and leading this protest are 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids.